place real? That depends. If real is what you can feel, smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Pikachu, I have in my hand 2 pills. You take the blue pill, and the story ends now. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the Diglett hole goes. But be warned, dive too deep, and you may never return.
For less than comp for a long time, unless you're like trying to promote what you're selling, which could look weird because it could look like you're pumping and dumping too.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, if it's just promoting your store, like if you're trying to just get people to check out what you have, that I don't think that's pumping and dumping. And, if you're just getting people trying to get eyeballs over to your general store. But yeah, it's tough. It's with so many different markets and so many few eyes. That's why I think, like we were talking about earlier, like being picky about what you're choosing, like if you're looking for the kinds of cards that there's a number of people who you think are going to be looking for that card pretty regularly, you're probably pretty safe. Somebody will find it at some point. But, so that's why I feel like there's a difference between like scarcity and obscurity. If you have a card that's obscure, that's kind of, that nobody's looking, it could be the rarest card, it could be the coolest looking card, but if nobody's really looking for it, then there's no more demand than a common base card from from Hoops or whatever. So I think you have to approach it with kind of looking at it from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, I actually like collecting the obscure cards just because it's like, and a lot of times it's a nice card, and it's like, oh well, nobody's like going after it, so perfect.
Yeah. Did you see my video I put out a little while ago about the port I bought on ComC? That was like, it was only $60, but it was like, it included a whole bunch of like 1890s like cigarette cards, like actresses, like stage actresses from 1890, and like all this stuff. It was the coolest obscure set, like all this stuff I had never heard of. But I had so much fun learning about all of it. It was like 100 cards for $60. It was so cheap, but it was so much fun for me. I don't think I'm going to sell any of those, but it was because it was this obscure stuff that I had never heard of. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I didn't see the video. I'm gonna check that video out. Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I've kind of like gotten into. I'm interested in like some weird stuff. There's one thing. Because I guess I think we're planning on in at 2 hours, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was like the whole shield bidding thing. I don't know if you think it's like the same, better, or worse now, just because obviously it's still going on. I don't know if I told you, this probably happened later on. There's like a rare Yu-Gi-Oh card I bought. And it was literally from PWCC. I bought it. It was like a BGS 9.5. It was like $2,000 or something like that. And that's about the most I'm gonna pay for a sports card. And it's like something that I really wanted, and it's like super hard to find. Crazy enough, a PSA 10 came up, and I got the same card for like about the same price on another website. So I'm like, okay, BGS 9.5s kind of sell for like half or whatever. Maybe it was like 2,300 or something like that. So it sells for half. So yeah, 1,200 or something like that. One of the issue was like PWCC, they waited forever to sell the card because I like wanted to sell it. Like they waited like 3 months to sell it. Like I put in, and it was like, and then it sold. And it sold for like $600, and I'm just like, "What the freak?" like, and also I don't buy. I actually rarely buy stuff now. I've rarely bought stuff since like beginning of January this year. But like, and I only play with money I'm gonna lose. But like, I'm willing to lose. But it's just like, what? And the crazy thing is, I saw the same card in the BGS 9.5 sell for $4 or $5 or $6 or $7,000. So it's like
that was when it was through PWC. That was on auction, right?
Yeah, for auction.
Yeah, that's the thing about, it's so volatile. The auctions for so many cards are going to be based on who happens to see them. What are the eyes on there? So it's hard to rely on auctions, because you just never know. You just never know who's going to happen to be there, or who's going to notice it. That's true on eBay, where there's an ocean of cards, so many can get lost in that ocean. On PWCC also, there's quite a big ocean of cards, and maybe less eyeballs there than there might be on eBay. So I feel it's hard to rely on auctions. I don't really like putting cards up for auction unless I feel like a little bit more certain, like it's the kind of card that a lot of people are going to be putting into the search bar. Like there's just too many cards can fall through the cracks. If you look at the previous sales on almost any card, it seems like there's always a couple of them that are like, what happened right there? Why did that card auction for so much less than the one that went the day before and the one that went the day after? Like there's so many that fall through the cracks.
See, yeah, there's two things. That when you actually said something that was really, really, really good. But the first thing was technically PWCC. The reason why they waited to sell the card was because they wanted to they have an algorithm and they want to slip it into the right spot where it can get the most views and get the most bids and sell for the highest amount. And it also helps them because the person's going to be paying PWCC fees and stuff for higher amount cards. And they're supposed to kind of promote the card too. I think they have a email list they send out and they promote the card. They did all that and it still sold for a lot worse. So it's just and then dang, I just forgot what you said. Oh yeah. So basically, when it comes to all this, even with shield bidding, there's still gonna be cards that fall through the cracks. And I think that's we mentioned a 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 10 card sold for $174,000. That's probably a card that fell through the cracks. Maybe it's worth that much, and nobody's really willing to go over that. But a lot of shield bidders, especially if you have a large inventory, that's a lot of cards to keep up with. And there's new stuff coming out, and if you're looking at the new stuff too, you're going to struggle and you're going to have some it's just going to be a struggle, and you're going to continue to see things fall through the cracks and things get lower and lower and lower.
Yeah. And like we were saying before, there's so many places that people can buy cards that that people aren't necessarily, even if they're getting, if they're on the email list for Pristine Auctions or PWCC, maybe they also had a card show they're going to next weekend and they're saving up money for that card show, or maybe there's some other card that there's so many different possible spaces that people could be spending their finite amount of money, that it's just hard to know what could happen with any individual single card. It's one of the reasons I like, I prefer putting cards onto a buy it now situation, like on ComC, for example, or, when I move back to the US, I'll be using eBay a lot more as well. And, and just letting it sit there, maybe if there's a card that I see, okay, this has been sitting there for a long time. There's not been a lot of interest. Maybe, I want to offload this inventory. Maybe I'll put it up for auction and see what happens. I kind of expect at this point auctions to do worse than I would have expected them to. It's my expectation.
That's true. Yeah. That's probably why there's still so much shield bidding though. Cause people are trying to sell. They're like, oh, well, I don't want this to sell for low. So I'm going to try to shield bid this up and make it seem valuable and kind of get people caught up in buying it. But then they go sell it to next. I just seen this a lot. I've seen this a lot with UFC cards. Just certain cards literally sold for $200, and there's another in the auction, and then the next day it sells for $100, and it's and it's by the same seller, and it's the same.
It happens all the time. I was amazed at how frequently it happened when I was making a video a while back that was the highest card sold from each team, and so I was looking through each of these cards, and it kept being that exact situation kept happening again and again. I was amazed at how often it was where the exact same card would sell a week later for a bit less than the previous. It just kept happening. It's like, oh my gosh, like, I'm sure some of these are not shill bids, but a very strong portion of these are shill bids. It's one of the reasons I feel like it's hard to trust. You can't trust the data completely. Like, the data is the data. It's the data, if you get data from different sources, there's ways to try to filter out some of that. Some of the data tools try to filter out some of that as well. And even sites like 130point.com, they try to filter out some of the most likely shilled stuff, but it's really hard to do that. And so it becomes hard to rely on the data. You have to really be able to rely on your understanding of the market forces, the understanding of supply and demand, your understanding of what is the hype, what's speaking, what's actually the things that people are interested in. You have to kind of understand the narratives outside of the data, more so, because the data is so suspect sometimes.
Yeah, I know from personal experience. Early in the year, I bought like a Jim Brown PSA 7 rookie card.
Nice.
And it was like it fell in price dramatically. So I got like a pretty good deal. And then there was a second one that came up, and I bought that one, and they were around the same time of each other. Because I sold a bunch of stuff and I had like a bunch of extra money. So I was like, okay, I can get, I try to get quality over quantity. So like, and I was like, cool, I got 2 really good Jim Brown cards. And the second one they didn't send. I guess they said they sent it, and it showed up as like also, the bad thing was it sold like much cheaper, because I remember Neo did a video and he was talking about the Jim Brown cards, and that was one that you talked about that sold for much less.
That was yours.
Yeah. So it was like one of those things where it was like a scam. The person, I got my money back and stuff. And
they just didn't like the selling price, huh? So like, nope, I'm not gonna send that.
And then they just like deleted their account and started a new account and tried to.
That's
sell it
unfortunate.
again.
That's one of the things, with so much of sports cards is online, and it's not face-to-face interaction. I feel like, people can, it's easier for people to default to unethical behavior when you don't have a person-to-person interaction with somebody.
True.
Like if you're actually talking with somebody and making a person-to-person interaction, like, the better parts of yourself are more likely to display it. Oftentimes, people hide behind the screen and the worst of themselves come out. So I feel like, that's one of the negatives about so much of the hobby being online. There's a lot of positives. I mean, I love being able to have access to being able to find anything, on eBay, that anything, absolutely anything is there. So it's nice, but it's also, it lacks the person-to-person kind of aspects of things.
Yeah, I think it's probably better to buy and negotiate with someone, because you can get stuff like, generally under comps, and then there's not like the selling fees and stuff like that. If you're trying to sell to someone, because I went to a couple sports card shows like in the local area. One of the guys, because we were trying to, I had like a vintage card or whatever, and we were trying to figure out, it was just rare, and it's trying to figure out like the actual price, and we're doing the calculations or whatever, and then we're trying to see what it was actually worth, and then he was giving me obviously a lot of these people are trying to, especially a lot of dealers, right, they're trying to like buy and sell and make profits, right? So he wanted it for $2,500, and we were kind of determined the price to be $3,300, and I was like, yeah, the lowest I go is like $3,000. Well, technically you can argue that the price should have been $4,000, but I was like, yeah, I'll give it for $3,000, but he wanted it for $2,500, so we didn't do the deal, and I just sold it on PropSteam, and got it for around $3,000. And that was around the time where, I don't know, cards selling for over $1,000 was only 5% or whatever. So it was like one of those things where I just made more money selling online. But it was just like one of those things where if you're going to shows, I think it may be smart to go to shows consistently and buy and sell, because like the price points are a little bit different. You don't have the fees and stuff, but the price points are kind of
Yeah.
different.
And you start to build, I think over time you start to build the relationships too. Like, so,
True.
if a certain seller knows you're going to buy from them regularly, like you'll probably be able to get some good deals from them on time. And if somebody, you're coming to sell regularly, and people know that they can get, the inventory or the cards that they really like, that you'll have them, and they know there's going to be a certain level of consistency, then they might also be, more willing to see, what's possible. So I feel like there is some advantages to consistency, in person kind of shows, even with things like